Right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidil Awwaleen wal Akhirin, wa Habibi Rabbil Alameen. Before going into continuing reading the text, there are a few matters that need to be understood. I'm sorry it's so small, the writing is so small, MashaAllah. But there are some more things that you will need to write. It's important to understand the stance of these people so that it can be refuted. People who have a stance usually base it upon something. This is obvious. They say what they say because of something. So we need to understand what the stance of the Wahhabiyya is and what they base it upon, and then we will refute that. We will debunk that supposed proof that they use. So let's see. The Wahhabiyya say that it is obligatory upon us to believe in Allah. Yes, we say this too. They say it's obligatory upon us to take the mutashabih verses literally. Just to make this very, very clear. Imagine you had a book in the English language. And this book, it contains sentences. These sentences are either the meaning that is intended by them is the literal meaning or an underlying meaning, a figurative meaning. So let's take two sentences as examples. Okay, this is not on your sheet. So the first sentence, if we were to say in English language, the boy sat down. The boy sat down. Then in the English language, this doesn't carry another meaning. The boy sat down. The most apparent meaning, the only meaning actually, of this statement, because of the words used within this statement, is that the boy sat down. I don't even know how else I could say that in another way. The boy sat down. As opposed to the statement, he asked he asked for his, no, that's wrong. He asked her father, he asked her father for his daughter's hand in marriage. This statement, according to the words used, can have two meanings. Either the apparent literal meaning, which is that he asked for her hand, this body part, like he wants to borrow it or something. Either this literal meaning, or it has become known that this is used figuratively to mean that he is asking for her hand, i.e. in marriage. So, here in this one book, you have a statement like the sentence, the boy sat down, which can only mean its apparent meaning. And you have another statement, which is, he asked her father for her hand. And we know that can mean in marriage, and it can mean also literally. For someone to say now that what the author intended was the literal meaning, we would come back and say that's absurd. The author of the book did not mean the literal meaning, because that would entail chopping her hand off. That would entail mutilation of the body, and that's not appropriate. In a similar way, when it comes to the Qur'an, the Wahhabiyya and anthropomorphists before them, mushabbiha, hashawiyya, they look at, so if you look at your sheet now, they look at the words that have been attributed to Allah in the Qur'an. And they say everything that is attributed to Allah, we must take its apparent meaning, its literal meaning. Now, this is not putting words in their mouth, this is what they actually say. They say we must take the most apparent meaning, we must take the literal meaning. Even if there are numerous meanings, they say that when it comes to the attributes of Allah, you need to take the literal meaning. So they don't say that in general for the whole Qur'an, just for the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Right? So that point is clear, that they say you have to take the verses literally. Which verses? Which verses, Uncle Yunus? Which verses? No, see? No. Which verses? Yes. No. Subhanallah. Yes, the verses that pertain to Allah. I'll go again. The Wahhabiyas say that all the verses, verses in which Allah is mentioned. Is Allah mentioned in all the verses in the Qur'an? The answer is no. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Allah revealed that this Qur'an is a book in which there is no doubt. It is attributed to having been revealed. Allah was not mentioned in this verse. Right. So we know Allah is not mentioned in every verse in the Qur'an. There are stories in the Qur'an. Okay. Is Allah mentioned in some verses in the Qur'an? Yes. Come on. Yes, of course. Allah is mentioned in some verses in the Qur'an. Allah mentioned Himself in the Qur'an. In these verses in which Allah is mentioned, Allah attributed matters to Himself. These words that are attributed in these verses to Allah, the Mushabbiha say, this attribution must be a literal one. You have to take it literally. Even if the words that have been attributed to Allah have 7 or 8 different meanings, they say that you have to take the most apparent, the most commonly used meaning of that word. You have to use it for Allah, even if it denotes things. They say, no, you just look for the most apparent meaning. I'll give an example. Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. Istawa, its most apparent meaning is to sit. There's no doubt about that. Istawa, its most apparent meaning is to sit. It's not the only meaning, but it's the most apparent. So no one's going to sit here. The scholars of Ahlul Sunnah didn't lie and say, no. It means sit. Istawa, its most literal meaning is sit. So people like the Wahhabiyya said, you have to take that literal meaning. Does that make sense? So only the verses in which Allah is mentioned and things are attributed to Allah, they said those things that are attributed to Allah must be taken literally. Also the hadiths. They said, if the Prophet ﷺ attributed something to Allah in a hadith, that hadith must be taken literally. Okay? The Wahhabiyya say that we have to take these things literally. Now, you need to understand this really well. Really, really well. They say 2 things and then they try to back them up with two proofs. They say, you have to take these verses literally. Now, for this part, they don't have a proof. For this part, they don't have a proof. Saying that you have to take the verses literally and by the most apparent meaning, for this, they don't have a proof. Then they say, despite us having to take the literal meaning, Allah is not like the creation. So what proof do you think they use to say Allah is not like the creation? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Are you understanding? They say Allah is not like the creation. They say, yes, we say Allah is not like the creation. The Wahhabiyya say Allah is not like the creation. Why do they say that? Because Allah revealed لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Despite that, they say those verses in which Allah attributed things to Himself, they say you've got to take them literally. So they say you've got to take it literally and give it the apparent meaning, but at the same time you've got to say He's not like the creation. Then a third matter now is that they say, actually only Allah knows the meanings of those verses in which He attributed things to Himself. So imagine, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa. They'll say Allah is above the Arsh. Or they'll say, well, not anymore. They don't say He sits anymore because they've softened their tone. So they'll say, okay, He sits or He's above. Then we'll say, no, you can't say that because Allah said, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Allah said He's not like the creation. So they'll say, no, of course, Allah لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. We say He's above, they'll say, but Allah is not like the creation. And then they'll say, to confuse people even more, they'll say, you've got to take the literal meaning. He's not like the creation though. And then they'll say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. They'll say, actually, only Allah knows the real meaning. But that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say, you've got to take the literal meanings of those things. And by taking the literal meanings, they say Allah is above. They say Allah descends based on literal meanings that they've taken from hadiths and ayahs. They say Allah descends, Allah jogs, Allah laughs, Allah is amazed, Allah was in a cloud, Allah comes. Okay, so they say all these things, and you got to take it literally, but then they say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. They say, but only Allah knows their meaning, which is a contradiction. It actually is a contradiction. Then they'll say, when we say to them, no, a'udhu billah, kufrun, this is kufr. How can you say that Allah has hands and eyes? And they say, ya akhi, laysa kamithlihi shay. You think, hey? How can you take it literally and then say He's not like they'll say, oh, it's a hand, but not like our hand. Then they'll say, well, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. But you know what? Really, only Allah knows what it means. But you just said it's a hand. So how can you say وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ? So, it is important for us to know that the Wahhabiyya, the Mushabbiha of today, look at the verses that are mutashabih verses, meaning verses in which Allah Ta'ala attributed things to Himself. They take these verses and they say it's obligatory for you to take the literal meaning. So far, okay, so what if, let's ask now, rhetorical question, what if somebody, according to them, does not take the literal meaning? What is his judgment according to them? They'll say kafir. That's it, outright kafir. Why? Because they'll say, oh, because you didn't take the literal meaning, you're inventing your own meaning. You have resorted to your own devices. and you've invented a meaning. So you're saying something that Allah didn't. That's where their notion of at-ta'wil, ta'til comes in, where they say to give it a meaning, to give it a non-literal meaning, which is supposedly obligatory, they say to give it a non-literal meaning is kufr. So anybody who says, for example, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, anyone who says that it doesn't mean above, and rather anyone who says that it means Allah has control over the arsh, they'll say, this is ta'til. This is it's like they would say, it's like stripping Allah of what he attributed to himself, which is al-istiwa. And saying that, they'd say is kufr. So according to them, it is obligatory that we take the literal meaning. Why? Why do they say it's obligatory to take the literal meaning? What's their supposed proof in that? They don't have one. They actually don't have one. They actually don't have one. Except that they use the emotional argument of, well, Allah made it very clear, and had Allah wanted us to understand something else like control, he would have just revealed control. So, firstly, it's important to understand that the Wahhabiyya do not have a proof for taking those matters attributed to Allah literally. They don't have a proof. Then they trick the people by saying, well, you've got to take it literally, but still Allah is not like the creation. And when they were pushed, how did these matters come out? When they were pushed and charged with blasphemy, i.e. that it was said to them, if you attribute a literal hand to Allah, it only means something physical. They said, no, laysa kamithlihi shay. We said, well, you can't have a hand that is not like the hand of the creation. They said, no, you know what? We believe in a literal hand. It's not like the creation. And actually, these verses, only Allah knows what they really mean. Who remembers a proof here about, which we can use to refute them when they say this part, that only Allah knows what it means? Who remembers something? If the Wahhabi or someone else says, only Allah knows what these verses mean, even though they've attributed the literal meaning and said it's not like the creation, what is the proof that we use against them if they say only Allah knows what it means? What about the ayah? Sorry? Yes, continue then. What's the... It is, but they will say, we take by qira'at al-waqf. Qira'at al-waqf is when you recite it by stopping at the name of Allah. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Then, they'll say, well, literally, only Allah knows the meaning. Then they'll say, a new sentence started. وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ, that those who are well rooted in knowledge, they say we believe in Allah. They'll say that's a different thing. So how do you refute them?
According to them, they would be claiming
Yep.
the Prophet is calling people to worship that which could not be known.
Exactly. Like Al-Qushayri said. Al-Qushayri said that, very good. He said that, well, if they say that only Allah knows their meaning, even though they have said already that you've got to take the literal meaning, and they've given Allah physicality and modality, kaif, even though they've said all that, by saying that only Allah knows what they mean, the Al-Qushayri said, well, this would mean Because remember, it's about the attributes of Allah. That this would mean that the Prophet ﷺ, when reciting the verses of the Qur'an to the people, it's as though you're saying that, obviously, then not even the Prophet knew. If only Allah knows what they mean, then you're saying that not only that even the Prophet did not know. So as though you're saying that the Prophet was calling the polytheists to come to worship a God whose attributes only God knows, and he can't even be known. It's like saying, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, as though the Prophet is saying, come and worship Ar-Rahman, who ala al-arsh istawa, but I don't know what istawa means. And nobody knows what istawa means. Nobody in the world knows what yad means. Nobody knows what a'yun means. Nobody knows what ja'a rabbuka means. So Al-Qushayri said the people would have a right to ask, well, what is it that you are calling us to? Who is it that you are calling us to worship? Because we cannot worship what we don't know. Did Al-Ghazali say, لا تصح العبادة? Your worship is not valid إلا بعد معرفة المعبود, until you know your creator. So by them saying, oh well, all these things that are attributed to Allah, we can't know what they mean. Well then, how are we supposed to know God? Where is our ma'rifah? How can we worship what we don't know? Anyway, so the Wahhabiyah, they say all of the matters that are attributed to Allah, whether in the Qur'an or in the hadiths, you've got to take them literally. So in the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ said, ضَحِكَ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَةِ, the Wahhabiyah would say, it means, you have to say, Allah laughed tonight. Or, عَجِبَ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَةِ, they would say that it means Allah was astonished tonight, and so on. So they'll say you've got to take it literally. Then when you charge them with kufr and say, no, you can't say that because these are attributes of the creation, they'll say, no. It's laughing, but laysa kamithlihi shay. It's laughing, but not like the laughing of the creation. As if there was laughing, one might say, before Allah created laughing. Or they would say, no, Allah was astonished, but not like we're astonished, astaghfirullah. Astonished, but laysa kamithlihi shay, but not like the astonishment of the creation. Then we'd say, no, this doesn't add up. Then say, you know what? مَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Actually, only Allah knows what they mean. But you just said what it means. You said it means laugh. Then you go around in a circle. You say, no, but not like the laughing of the creation. Only Allah knows what it means. But you said what it means. No, but not like that. And you go round and round and round and round. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. So, in reality, the Wahhabiyah and their likes are easily refuted. Okay? And we're going to discuss some of that now, inshallah. So, next week, inshallah, this you should be able to answer that. Okay, I know I'm repeating, but with good cause, with good intentions. I'm repeating so it's very, very clear. The Wahhabiyya, even if you want it bullet points, I'll do it again. The Wahhabiyya don't have a proof to say that we are obligated to take these verses literally. They don't have a proof. They take them literally. And then they say, but it's not like the creation. This is to pull wool over the eyes of people. They take it literally, give Allah physicality, and then say, but it's not like the creation. And then when they're pushed, they say, only Allah knows their meaning. Okay, so let's read now what Al-Qushayri. Oh, we're not on the saying of Al-Qushayri yet. We'll be there soon. So, does anybody have a question about that? Anything that's unclear or needs repeating even, that's absolutely fine. Right. If you repeat after me, those of you who are able. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. This is a very, very important part of this verse. Again, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. The Wahhabiyah use this verse to say only Allah knows the actual meanings of the attributes that are attributed to Him in the verses of the Qur'an and in the hadiths of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. What do Ahl Sunnah say? We're going to discuss that a little later, but this is very, very important. So, to understand this topic as it should be understood, it is necessary to know that the Qur'an has within it muhkam verses and mutashabih verses. So Allah revealed, هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ. Allah is the one that revealed the Qur'an to you. Minhu, among this Qur'an, are what? آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. There are ayat, verses that are known as muhkamat. Each one is muhkam. So their plural are muhkamat. Hunna, they are ummul kitab. They are of the foundation. They are what you go back to, the muhkamat. Like laysa kamithlihi shay. Wa ukhar, and there are other verses. Wa ukharu mutashabihat, and there are mutashabihat verses. This ayah, which is ayah 7. This ayah should be memorized. One should seek to memorize it. Okay? I won't say by next week. Let's have an intention before we die. And we don't know when we're going to die. We might die before next week. Huh? But this is something that if you've been through it 2 or 3 times, then the words should already be familiar. You should already be familiar with the words. It's important for you to memorize this ayah because a lot comes from this ayah. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ ابْتِغَاءَ الْفِتْنَةِ وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدِ رَبِّنَا وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. As for those who have deviancy in their hearts, zayg, they follow from within it, from the Qur'an, the literal meanings of the mutashabih verses. And they cause fitna, tribulations. They misguide people. And with the purpose of seeking to interpret it with their deviant opinions. And then the next part of the verse, I won't mention right now. So the muhkam verses are like laysa kamithlihi shay. Allah is not like the creation in any way. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. Likewise, and there is none similar to Allah. هَلْ تَعْلَمُ لَهُ سَمِيًّا. Do you know any similar to Allah? Meaning there is no similar to Allah. These are all muhkam verses. Verses that can only carry one meaning. So they are a foundation. We go back to these verses. They are a reference in a sense. Then you have the mutashabih verses. The mutashabih verse is the verse that its linguistic meaning is not clear, or that it could possibly have numerous dimensions in meaning. And there is a need for contemplation to interpret it in accordance with the proper meaning. An example is verse 5 of Surah Taha. Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa. This means Ar-Rahmanu istawa on the arsh. Ar-Rahman istawa on the arsh. In other words, the arsh is under the control of Allah. Another example, and now the word istawa can have many meanings in the Arabic language. That's why it comes under the mutashabih category. Another verse is one which might confuse some people. It is the saying of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, verse 10 of Surah Fatir, إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. If someone takes it literally, or they read the Qur'an without the proper knowledge, they will say that it means, and to Him, i.e. Allah, and to Him the good words ascend, go up. By that a person will have believed that Allah is in the sky or above. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So they'll say, إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ, literally, that to Allah the good words ascend, rise. وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ, and the good deeds, they raise these good words, literally. The actual meaning is that the good words, such as La ilaha illallah, go up to a place that Allah has honored, the sky. And the good deed is raised by such phrases. Meaning, if a person is a believer and they perform good deeds because they say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, alayhi salatu wassalam, these good words, because a person is a believer, the good deeds will rise. Meaning they'll be rewarded for these deeds that they do. To understand the meaning of the mutashabih verses, it is necessary to refer them back to the muhkam verses. Okay? Is it clear up to there? Right. Now, the mutashabih is also of two types. There are two types of mutashabih. One that we've been discussing already. Okay? Which it could have linguistically a number of meanings, and one of the meanings, we would pick the most appropriate meaning. The other verses that are referred to as mutashabih are the ones in which matters are mentioned that actually only Allah knows, but they are not pertaining to the attributes of Allah. Like what? When the day of judgment is exactly. When the rain will fall exactly at which point. And other matters. And where a person would die. These matters are mutashabih. When Ad-Dajjal will appear, when Al-Mahdi will appear, when Isa alayhi salatu wassalam will appear. These matters, if they are mentioned in the Qur'an or the Hadiths, they are also known as mutashabih, meaning matters which are not clear, they're not known to us. This is another meaning of mutashabih. So, if I say another way, there is a type of mutashabih that we can know, like, obviously, the attributes of Allah. And there is a mutashabih that we cannot know, that only Allah knows. Like the exact time of the coming of the Dajjal. So there are two types of mutashabih. So if you look at the verse now, let's go back to the verse. If you remember, this verse, or this part of the verse, can be recited in two ways. Either, now this is according to Ahl Sunnah, either وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدِ رَبِّنَا. So, all at once. That's one way you can read it. And this is called قِرَاءَةُ الْوَصْلِ, where you continue, you don't stop. Or you can say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ Al-ayah. So, reading it the first way and then reading it the second way, this changes the meaning. Changes the meaning. If you read it one way, then it carries a meaning. If you read it the second way, then it changes the meaning slightly. Okay. And both of these recitations are valid. Okay? If we say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, literally, only Allah knows its meaning, then this refers to what? Yes, the mutashabih, that we cannot know, that only Allah knows, which are the matters that pertain to the creation that only Allah knows. But if we read it the other way, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, that Allah knows these matters and the well-rooted scholars, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, these scholars also know. So this refers to the mutashabih, like the meaning of istiwa in Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa. This refers to the mutashabih, which is a hadith or an ayah in which something has been attributed to Allah. Right? So you can read it this way or you can read it that way. But look, if I want to recite it and say, like for example right now, I'll say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ. Right? So if I recite it that way, I believe that this means that Allah and the scholars, they know the meaning of those attributes that were attributed to Allah. Fine. And despite me reading it like that, I also believe that there is another type of mutashabih also that only Allah knows. Right? Which is the exact time of the Day of Judgment. Does that make sense? So it's not like, oh, you've got to go one way or the other. No, we believe in both. So and then if I want to recite it the other way, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, I'd say, oh, because I recited it this way, it actually gives that meaning, which I also believe in. Okay? So all this to tell you what? That وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, only Allah knows their meaning, does not refer to the attributes of Allah, like the Wahhabis said. You see? So it doesn't refer to the attributes of Allah, that, oh, only Allah knows His attribute. Only Allah knows the meaning of what's been attributed to Him in the Qur'an. No, it doesn't mean that. It means the other mutashabih, like وجبة القيامة ووقت خروج الدجال ونزول الغيث and so on. So it's very important for us to understand these things about this particular ayah. Right. So now if we read, it should be very clear. Thus, to understand the meaning of the mutashabih verses, it is necessary to refer back to the muhkam verses. This is in reference to the mutashabih matters that are possible for the scholars to know. As for, according to the recitation of stopping at the majestic name, يعني الوقف عند لفظ الجلالة, to stop at the name of Allah, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, to stop there, i.e. pausing the recitation of the word Allah in what Allah revealed, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, then according to this recitation, the mutashabih refers to the matters such as the exact time of the occurrence of the Day of Judgment. It's mutashabih, we don't know when it is. And the precise time of the emergence of ad-Dajjal, the impostor. It does not refer to the other mutashabih, which is like the meaning of istiwa. It does not refer to that. Okay, that should be very, very clear. So you have al-muhkam, if you want to diagramize, if you will, it in your mind, right? Verses of the Qur'an. Muhkam, muhkam verses and mutashabih verses. Mutashabih verses are of two types. Things that only Allah knows and that don't pertain to the attributes of Allah. And then the other matters that the scholars know, the highly ranked scholars know, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala obviously knows. And that these pertain to the attributes of Allah. The Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam directed us to take by the muhkam verses and to believe in the mutashabih verses. He said, "i'malu bi muhkamih wa aminu bi mutashabih." Apply the muhkam and believe in the mutashabih. This hadith is slightly weak, but it can be relied upon. So let us read the saying of Al-Qushayri. I'll read it quickly, we'll repeat it next week inshallah. But you'll see the matters that we've reviewed today, you'll be able to spot them. He's saying that there, he's saying that, you'll be able to spot them. Abu Nasr Al-Qushayri rahimahullah is the one who Al-Hafiz Abdul Razzaq Al-Tabsi described as Imamul A'immah. He was the Imam of the Imams. And he was an Ash'ari. And as was narrated by Al-Hafiz ibn Asakir in his book Tabinu Kadhib al-Muftari, the Muhaddith, the Lughawi linguist, the Hanafi scholar Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi said in his commentary of Ihya Ulumuddin, called Ithaf al-Sadat al-Muttaqeen, which I'm sure you all knew from last time, conveying from At-Tadhkiratu al-Sharqiyya by Abu Nasr al-Qushayri what follows. And for next week, what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to have in your mind where Abu Nasr al-Qushayri said this, and where it was recorded, and which book that was. It's all there in that paragraph there, but it just takes some time for you to separate it out and, understand it. So Al-Qushayri said, as for what Allah Azza wa Jal revealed, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, this means no one knows its ta'wil except Allah. What is meant here is the exact time of the hour of the Day of Judgment. Why did he start with this? So you've got the background now. Because the Wahhabis say, and others, Mushabbiha, they say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. They say, no one knows the meanings of the attributes of Allah except Allah. So they say that, right? But, so now you have the background. That's why he started with this. He said, look, this ayah, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, you know what it means? It means the other mutashabih. So what is meant is the exact time of the hour of the Day of Judgment. The idol worshippers asked the Prophet ﷺ about the hour, when will it happen? Therefore, the mutashabih in this verse, the unknown matter in this verse, refers to the knowledge of the unseen, and that no one knows the outcome of these matters except Allah. Like Allah revealed, هَلْ يَنظُرُونَ إِلَّا تَأْوِيلَهُ يَوْمَ يَأْتِي تَأْوِيلُهُ. Are they awaiting for anything other than its ta'wil? The day when its ta'wil comes, meaning they are waiting for, are they waiting for the occurrence of the hour? This just backs up that وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ doesn't refer to the attributes of Allah. It refers to for example, the exact time of the Day of Judgment. Anyway, then he said, how could it be acceptable for someone to say about the book of Allah, there is something in it for which there is no way for a creation to know what it means? You see how it's linked? You see how it's linked now? Because the Wahhabis say, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, only Allah knows what these attributes mean. No one else knows. And yet they liken him to the creation. So Al-Qushayri said, how would it be acceptable for someone to say about the book of Allah that there is something in the Qur'an which there is no way for the creation to know about it? No way for the creation to know what it means. And that no one knows its meaning except Allah. Is this not among the greatest discreditors of prophethood? It's having a stab at Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He continued that the Prophet did not know the meaning of what was stated about the attributes of Allah. It's not like saying that, for example, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, what are the best of places and what are the worst of places? He said, La adri, I don't know, I'll ask Jibreel. So Jibreel ﷺ was asked and he said, La adri, as'alu Rabb al-Izzah. I will wait for revelation from Allah. Right? So then Jibreel ﷺ returned and told the Prophet ﷺ the best of places are the masajid and the worst are the markets, al-aswaq. So this was something, yes, that the Prophet ﷺ asked about. But to say that the Prophet doesn't know about the so many things that are mentioned about Allah in the Qur'an that Allah sent the Prophet with, that is a great, great, great discreditor of the Prophet of the Prophet ﷺ and of the one that sent the Prophet, i.e. of Allah. Because Allah is attributed with eternal and everlasting wisdom. Hikmah. Hikmah means to know where to put things. Where to put things. In order, in what way to do them. It's like saying, Allah doesn't know what He's doing. It's like saying, well, Allah sent a prophet, but didn't teach that prophet what the things that are attributed to Allah in the Qur'an mean. So someone might say, what was the point of sending him? So Al-Qushayri said, how would it be acceptable for someone to say that in the Qur'an there is something in which there is something in it for which there is no way of the creation to know about it, and that no one knows its meaning except Allah? He said, is this not among the greatest discreditors of prophethood? That the Prophet did not know the meaning of what was stated about the attributes of Allah, and that he called the creation to know what cannot be known? Did Allah not reveal in the Qur'an بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ that the Qur'an was revealed in a clear Arabic tongue? Then according to those people, it would be necessary to say Allah lied. Why? Because he said that the Qur'an was revealed in a clear Arabic tongue. If nobody knows what these verses mean, then where's the clarity? Where is the ibana? Where is the clarity? And since this is in the language of the Arabs, how would someone claim that this is something that the Arabs do not know, even though it was Arabic? Hence, what kind of saying is this doctrine? The doctrine of the Mushabbiha, Wahhabiyya, when it leads to contradicting Allah the Exalted. It's like saying, what kind of a belief is that? What kind of a belief is that? I'll just read this last paragraph. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ used to call the people to the worship of Allah the Exalted. So, had there been in what he conveyed to his nation something which no one knows its meaning except Allah the Exalted, then people would have been able to say, first, O Muhammad, clarify for us the one to whom you are calling us. Explain his attributes. And what is it that you are saying? What does istawa mean? What does yaday mean? What does a'yun mean? What do these words mean? Indeed, believing in something which cannot be known is not possible. And attributing to the Prophet ﷺ that he called to a Lord who is attributed with attributes that it is impossible to know, then this is a serious matter that no Muslim accepts. This is because ignorance of the attributes leads to ignorance of the attributed, i.e. Allah. So the goal for the one who has even a bit of intelligence is to clarify that the saying of the one who says his istiwa is an attribute of Allah and it is impossible to know what is meant by it, and that al-yad is an attribute of Allah and that it is impossible to know what is meant by, and al-qadam is an attribute of Allah and that it is impossible to know what is meant by, then this is a distortion of facts that leads to ascribing a manner of being, physicality, to Allah and likening Him to the creation. And it is a call to ignorance. It's like saying, come and worship that one that we cannot tell you about. Come and worship the one that cannot be known. So it's a call to ignorance. And the truth has become clear for the one who has a sound mind. Okay? So, inshallah, that should make, the introduction should make the saying of Al-Qushayri even more clear this time round. So you, hopefully, you need to go away and review this issue, inshallah, for next week. If you can, it would be great if you could memorize وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Okay? And also review that there are two types of mutashabih, and review what the Wahhabiyas say. Then if you have a question, then ask, by all means, ask. If there's something about their stance that you don't understand, why did they say such and such? Why did they say that? Then ask. Then ask. You can't fully be expected to refute somebody and to defend the religion if you don't understand what they are saying and why they are saying it. Okay? So this is an important matter. Okay? Today we'll stop here, inshallah. Are there any questions up to that? No. Okay? Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim.